screen starts glowing, and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the easy good score.
Hey everybody, and welcome to The Goods, a film podcast. This is episode, 209. Just one away from 210.
It's also one away from 208, if you're going backwards.
But we only go forwards, Dan. Only forwards into the future.
That's true.
Time's arrow points in one direction only. And like we usually are, listeners, we are here together, Dan and I, to talk about a movie here on The Goods. This week it's a documentary. I looked back at our records, and I feel like I tend to assign documentaries more frequently. We've had the We Are the World movie from Dan. What was that called?
The Greatest Night in Pop, I think.
That's right.
That was a fun one.
But I've queued up My Octopus Teacher. We watched Rock-afire Explosion. We watched March of the Penguins and its sequel.
I also brought Bears. Remember Bears? Double
that's
Bears.
Right.
Double barrel.
Two Bears, because it was also Grizzly Man.
Yeah.
Good call. But I kind of feel like when you start becoming a cinephile, you could go a couple routes. I mean, Dan does things like he'll watch somebody's whole filmography. I haven't really done that very much. But I think you may start appreciating documentaries, watching documentaries. Just like if you get curious about any topic, you're like, oh, I'll bet there's a documentary about that. When's somebody going to make the documentary about that?
Right. But there's a flip side to that too, which is that documentaries sometimes, as much as any film genre, risk becoming rote, becoming formulaic, you know? So we kind of have talked a little bit about that, like what separates a documentary as interesting and more than just like a magazine article. You know, I don't know where I got this from some writer, but he calls it the magazine article test, which is basically, could this documentary have just been a 15-page magazine article and you would have gotten more or less the same experience and knowledge? And obviously there's something to seeing it unfold in front of your eyes, but the very best and the very most interesting documentaries, the experience of like living in the world that they create is essential. It's not just communicating information about real life. It's bringing you somewhere. I guess that's true of any movie. I don't know, but I don't know where I'm going with this, Brian. But
no, this is going to be kind of a free-form episode, I think. Part of why documentaries almost feel like a secret club for cinephiles to me is there's a little bit of a bar to entry. You know, normal people, you don't go and see a documentary. Not the way that you would like a blockbuster fiction film. But then once you start going to watch them, you almost make the like conscious choice of this is who I am now. And look at all these sophisticated people who are here doing this thing with me. We've taken this next step in movie appreciation. It's like, because it's like eating your vegetables. It's like the kids need to learn eat their vegetables to grow up as a sophisticated, well-rounded adult. But maybe they don't taste the best. And documentaries, like the instinctive, I think, reaction is, this is boring. This is just people talking. Somebody just hit record on a camera. Why are we here? What are we doing?
I don't know. Some of them are like vegetables. Some of them are like taking a university course, going to a lecture. The other ones are not. I don't think Rockafire Explosion is eating your vegetables, Brian. I don't think American Movie is eating your vegetables. I would say that the documentaries I tend to love don't feel like eating your vegetables, but I do think you're right that, like, it's interesting. You said there's a barrier to entry, and it's almost like the opposite is true in some ways. It's like, if you ever look at charts, there was one that came across my feed, I think it was just yesterday. It's basically like, what percentage of movies are made in a certain genre over time? And so it's like mapped, it's a series of graphs, and it's mapped where like the leftmost side is 1920 and the rightmost side is 2020. And then there's like, okay, 15 different genres. It'll say the action movie. Okay, the action movie has been pretty steady across time. Comedy, gone up a little bit over time, even though it feels like they make fewer comedies than they used to. Western, of course, really high at the start through like the 50s. Then it just falls off a cliff around the time of Sputnik. Now they practically don't make Westerns anymore. Documentaries are like near the bottom up until like 1990, when Sony started selling prosumer cameras that university students could start making documentaries for like $2,000. And then it just, also that's when film school, the notion of studying making movies at college started. And then it just shoots up. So I tie it very directly with the idea both of like accessible equipment and also people learning about the film form in a more structured fashion in an academic environment. I think both of those have led to a rise in documentaries being made, and there's just so many of them now. I mean, there's like whole streaming services that are just documentaries. It's like, you want to learn about the solar system. Type in the solar system. Here's 15 documentaries about the solar system. And I don't know. I bring those up in part because those tie to you, Brian. A, you're studying film right now, and B, you are making a movie right now.
That's right. A lot of things to bounce off what you just said. All excellent salient points. Many very pertinent to the movie that we watched this week, which, as you said, if we didn't say the title already, it's called American Movie. It's a documentary from 1999, which is at least the world that we're introduced to here just before the cusp of the digital revolution. It's like the last gasps of the really old school way of doing this. But very much takes place in a film school environment. And yes, as we sit down here to record, I am 2 weeks out from rolling on my capstone film production. I'm doing a fiction film. Certainly a lot of the students in the cohort are doing documentaries. But probably by the time that you hear this, I'll be in the thick of production on that.
Well, I'm very curious to see how you feel about American Movie as someone who makes movies. I'm looking forward to this conversation, Brian.
Yeah, me too. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about. So the way that this movie came on my radar is when I was in undergraduate college a while back. I got really into videos by James Rolfe, who's best known as the Angry Video Game Nerd on YouTube. By the way, YouTube, I would say, is like 98% documentaries of some stripe. You know, it could be a very loose definition, but it's mostly stuff that's going on, even if it's like somebody playing a video game or who knows. It's not scripted content by and large.
Great point. I wasn't explicitly thinking about it, but I think you're right that a version of American Movie just 5 years later, 8 years later, would be almost unrecognizable, at least in terms of like the hoops that one has to go through to make and distribute a film. Because I mean, as we'll talk about. But I think you're right that this movie really couldn't be made in any other time. Certainly not any later than it was made. Right.
So in 2008 or 2009, my freshman or sophomore year of undergrad, James Rolfe had a video. So he was very into video games, but even more so into indie filmmaking and film history. So he posted this video talking about how much he loved American Movie and how like inspirational he found this story, and how this guy, the subject of the documentary, Mark Borchardt, is out there living the dream, making movies from nothing. And then, I don't know how long after that I tracked this down, and I did watch it, and I didn't really pick up what he was laying down. I didn't feel that inspiration. But I'm watching it now, again, for this week, and it does have poignancy. It's a poignant film.
I agree that it is self-evidently poignant and not self-evidently inspirational. I guess both of them are up for debate, and we will do that. But I would not describe this film in the terms that James Rolfe did either.
You want to watch a inspirational documentary that'll get you pumped for making movies, watch James Rolfe's video called Cinemassacre 200. That's the one that I watched freshman year of college that I thought, I think I need to make movies. And he was talking about how he would, like, as a kid in the 80s, edit using 2 VCRs plugged into each other. I was trying to picture how that would even work. But that's like a step easier to understand than the way Borchardt ends up editing movies in this film. Like, I just couldn't imagine actually splicing film. It seems so tedious, so destructive. You're like actually breaking down the thing you got to work on.
Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy. Anytime I watch like old school editing, it was in that film that we watched, F for Fake, that Orson Welles made too, which had like a special machine for it, but it's literally taping together. I mean, it's not like Scotch tape, but it's literally taping together film strips, cutting out frames and retaping it back together. That's what editing was. And like, I don't know, I think of editing as conceptual and not physical. When I think of editing, it's like, how do you get this shot to connect to this shot, and what are the ideas there? But like, it is literally a physical act up until the digital era.
That's right. Another great recent documentary, they rolled out a second season of the Industrial Light and Magic documentary on Disney Plus about George Lucas's special effects company. And just crazy to me how much I learned that they really revolutionized digital filmmaking, like across the board, including they basically invented digital editing. They came up with a tool called Edit Droid, which became Avid, which is still the industry standard for digital editing.
Wow.
And in the first season, they talked about it again. There was some repeats of stuff in the second season, but it was mostly about the Star Wars prequels getting made, which was interesting. But in the first season, there was a clip of George Lucas essentially saying, I don't want to edit this way anymore. He's like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way that computers can do this. So, team, get on it.
Wow. Yeah. One thing that was kind of surprised learning a lot about film in the past 5 years is that, first of all, George Lucas, like, I don't know, I grew up, my teens coincided with the release of the prequels. I guess the first one came out when I was about 11. So maybe like my early teens. And so, that's when you start to become aware of pop culture. And so George Lucas was just a joke at that point, And I guess I never really shook the feeling that he was kind of a joke and maybe even a hack. But then I rewatched his movies with fresh eyes, and I'm talking about the ones he actually directed, mainly the original Star Wars and American Graffiti, and like a visionary. I mean, just an all-time great director. And second of all, he's had his fingerprints on just an astonishing number of behind-the-scenes things, and I'm sure these documentaries get into. I mean, computer graphics, editing, sound, all that stuff.
Yeah, he's like movie Thomas Edison with maybe a little less baggage. People bag on Thomas Edison these days, but I see some similarities in terms of like industrializing invention. How do you like build a factory that makes inventions?
Interesting.
So let's talk about this documentary. We've been beating around the bush a little bit. It's called American Movie. Focuses on an independent filmmaker in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, named Mark Borchardt. This was made by a director called Chris Smith. And so, from what I was able to read about this, Chris Smith was attending graduate film school at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where he encountered this dude, Mark. And the footage that we see in this film covers a time span from September of 1995 to August of 1997.
So almost 2 years here. You get some seasons.
Yes, some passage of time. And then the documentary that Smith put together, American Movie, actually ended up going to Sundance and winning Best Documentary at Sundance. And it's sold to Sony for $1 million. And I was wondering if I'd seen anything else by this director, Chris Smith, and I looked up his filmography, and I mentioned that I don't like track a director down and watch intentionally through his filmography, but with Chris Smith, I realized I've seen like 2/3 of his films at least, because he's a big deal director of documentaries to this day, a documentarian, and he's like in charge of a bunch of the big ticket Netflix documentaries that they roll out and put at the top of your screen when you turn Netflix on. Like he did their Madeleine McCann abduction documentary. He did the 6-part WWF documentary. He did the Firefest documentary.
He's done some about musicians. I saw one about Wham, the George Michael duo, which I did like. And then I think he did one about Devo. Is that how you say it? The band that wore weird hats.
Yep. And the subjects of the film, Mark Borchardt, and especially his kind of sidekick friend, Mike Schrank, they got a degree of fame. They got some notoriety. They became cult stars, particularly among filmmakers. But they weren't selling projects for $1 million.
It does seem ironic. I don't know. Evocative, poignant, you said, that the guy who made the movie, who made the documentary, has had a very productive and successful career as a filmmaker. And the guy who the movie's about, I mean, spoilers, basically hasn't, right? I mean, it's not that he's done nothing. He didn't vanish into nothing, but he has never risen above cult curiosity, it seems.
Yeah, that's my understanding. But where we come into the story is that Mark Borchardt, I think we got to describe him a little bit. He's got long hair, he's got like a little wispy beard, and he's got these big thick glasses. And everybody in this movie, it takes place in Milwaukee, so they've got Milwaukee accents.
Yeah, there are times when they would say words and I wouldn't know, are they saying the word wrong because it sounds wrong, or is it like that weird northern Midwestern accent? And it turns out I think it's a little bit of both.
Right. Yeah, it's funny.
I feel like every high school has a Mark Borchardt. Like there's always a guy like this wherever you go. Maybe there's something regional about him. If you read reviews, a lot of people talk about the regional flavor and how these characters remind them of characters you see in the Midwest. But I knew guys kind of like him. It's like lanky, and his head is like 87% there, and then 13% in La La Land. And also like smart in some senses, in that like he can turn a phrase and like articulate an idea, and is like very quick to react to something. Like he's immediately processing something, but also like it's just loopy enough that it's like there's something missing there, you know? That's my read on him. And he made me think of like 4 people that I knew at various points, middle school and high school and stuff. And yeah, I think he's a somewhat universal type of person. It's also like a big kid. He never grows out of being a kid to some extent.
Right. I think you described all of that well. I see a little bit of Paul K.
For sure.
I see a little bit of myself.
I could see some of that too, yeah.
But what I was laughing about that I hadn't seen the first time I watched this movie is the Jeffrey Dahmer miniseries on Netflix with Evan Peters. And I see a lot of overlap with Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, they got a similar look. They got the big, thick, like 90s glasses. And they're both from Milwaukee. They're both working these, like, obscure dead-end jobs. No evidence in the film that Mark Borchardt is killing anyone. But one of his friends says, he's the kind of guy I always expected to read about because he killed somebody. Like, that's in the documentary.
He's got a dark streak. For sure. That said, it almost feels disingenuous to say it that way. Now, to be fair, I haven't read very much about Jeffrey Dahmer or seen the series or documentaries or interviews or whatever, so I can't really speak to what he is. But it's almost like not parallels, but like right angles. It's like Jeffrey Dahmer went left and this guy went right. Like this is how he chose to process his demons, was like obsessively pursuing art. And it is possible to imagine like he could take this obsession and these demons and turn it into like killing people, Like, I guess that's what Jeffrey Dahmer did.
And they're both alcoholics, and it's approximately the same window in time.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But yeah, you did a great job encapsulating the personality. He's kind of spacey, but he's passionate about film, but in like an abstract sense. Like, he knows that this is what he wants to do, but he doesn't seem to have a compelling understanding as to why.
Yes.
And at the start of the film, he's 30, I think. It's either from like when he's 29 to 31 or 30 to 32. And he's living in Milwaukee, living with his parents, working. So he does work a little bit, and it's strange jobs. He says he vacuums the cemetery. And then it cuts to that, and like the cemetery that he works at, it's like a bank vault. It's like rows of little doors that hold urns, I would guess. Like, I don't think there's bodies back in there. I think it's a repository for crematory urns.
Right. Yeah, I agree. He talks about having worked a factory job too, I think. And I think factories are an interesting touch point here, because I don't really know too much about the anthropology and history of the Midwest area. But it has the vibe of a factory town, or a former factory town that we're seeing here. And I think in some ways, the industrialization, we already used that word here, like the impact of that on being an American in some ways is like what Mark revolts against, like what he's like, his revulsion towards. He talks about hating dead-end jobs, boring, monotonous, pointless jobs that are epitomized by being like an assembly line worker. So he definitely does like the weird quirky stuff, like working at a cemetery, and they might talk about another one, I can't remember, but like
he's also a paper boy.
There you go. Yeah.
So it's a good follow-up on Mystery Team in some ways.
But just like in general, his existence is a reaction against living a dull life in a factory town.
Well said. At the start, he's raising funds. So I guess Smith ran into him doing film stuff at this university. Like, he was around working on various things, advertising various things he was trying to work on, and he got onto Chris Smith's radar, and, Chris Smith was a film student. He needed a topic, and this guy walked into his life. I was also thinking of some of the films we talked about back in Movies About Making Movies Month, like Disaster Artist was probably the biggest one, about the making of The Room.
Oh, 100%. I mean, this would have just slotted 100% into Movies About Making Movies Month. That was a terrific theme double month that Brian and I did. It was a lot of fun. And a lot of the things we talked about throughout that month are hit dead on in American movie. Yeah, like Tommy Wiseau, and why does this weirdo trying to make a movie when he like can't even grasp reality? Like, this is a less comical version of that,
Right. And a less optimistic version of Ed Wood.
Yeah.
But when it opens, Mark is trying to raise funds for a feature called Northwestern, which I guess has been his dream for a while, wants to make this movie Northwestern. And the title card of the documentary even says, American Movie, The Making of Northwestern.
Great title. Outstanding title, first of all. Just an American movie. Like, this is a movie about the American dream, about being in America. This is an American movie. Second of all, the making of Northwestern just becomes more poignant as the film goes along. And Northwestern is like, you'd have trouble coming up with a better name for a white whale movie. Like a movie that is just a pie in the sky of like representing a dream of a thing, The great beyond.
So there's like 15 minutes maybe. It's probably not even that long, maybe 10 minutes, where we think that's the movie we're going to see. We think we're going to see the making of Northwestern. And he's like meeting with actors who have been in some of his plays, which was really making me think of Ed Wood. Like, he's got this little stable of actors who do routinely work with him. And he's like meeting with people that he's trying to get money from. But I guess people just kind of tune out and they're not showing up as much. And there's a scene where he's like, well, we're 10 days out from starting to shoot, and this is not going to work. Like, I guess he had a date in mind before he really had anything else, is how it sounds to me. Like, marked on the calendar, oh, we start shooting this day, and then didn't do half the steps to get there.
Yeah, he's got like it's a very interesting, like, you can tell he's trying to use the will of his personality, and he does have a will of personality that does draw people in. He's not a nothing. He's not a total loser, And so, like, I can just imagine him like envisioning it all coming together and being like, this is the day it's going to happen, and like mapping out what some of the steps are and starting to get it going, but just like not getting the steam, because like early on, yeah, it's like, okay, the first production meeting, people are showing up, people are excited. People are auditioning and like getting enthusiastic about the script and stuff. And then we see snapshots of a second, third, fourth production meeting. In the fourth production meeting, it's just him and his buddies, And it's like, I wonder what Chris Smith, the documentarian, was thinking at this point. It's like, is this actually going to be a movie or is this total nothing,
I do find it interesting, documentaries that just take forever to make. And it's like, well, you better hope that there's a payoff at some point.
Right.
Like, what was one that I watched that took a really long time? I think what was it called? Making a Murderer. The one, I don't even remember what that guy's name was, but that was a big
Oh yeah,
blow up on Netflix that did crazy well.
right.
And like that covered like 10 years in the film. It's like they were working on this a long time, so I guess it's good that it turned into something.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they gotta, like, roll out season 2, and it's like, well, we worked for, 6 months, and here's 2 more episodes of kind of epilogue. But you can't just churn out another 10-year or even 2-year thing on a whim. Like, you gotta be invested.
I mean, that one was just crazy, though, because they were apparently making a documentary about the fact that this guy was wrongfully convicted. And then that turns out to be like episode 1 of the 6 episodes, because then there's this new murder that he gets arrested for. And the whole question is like, was it another frame up, or did he actually do it this time? So they kind of stumbled into like an extra juicy story in the case of that one.
Mm-hmm. Northwestern kind of unceremoniously falls through for now. And Mark has to decide, well, what am I going to do? And he decides that to raise funds for the bigger project, the feature, he is going to produce a short, which is another project that he abandoned somewhere along the way. He's like, so instead of making the feature that I abandoned 6 years ago, I'm going to resume the short I abandoned 2 years ago. And this is called Coh-ven.
Like a gathering of witches. But every time he says Coh-ven, I was like, that's not how I learned how to say that word. It's in a weird accent thing. And then you get the just a great punchline. Like 75% of the way through the movie, someone's like, wait, hold on, you're saying that word wrong. It's Coven, it's not Coven. It's like, no, it's Coh-ven. It's like, no, it's pronounced Coven. I mean, maybe if you had an umlaut on there or something like that. And I was just awestruck at that we got to witness this payoff on literally, it was like years of this joke being set up. If you think about him filming the documentary, a punchline a year and a half in the making.
And so the rest of the film follows the making of Coh-ven. And that's really what it is mostly about. And then at the end is the premiere of Coh-ven.
But we don't even know that. Like when he pivots to Coven, we don't know that that's what the rest of the movie is. So to me, the reason I like this title, The Making of Northwestern, is like, okay, so he's making this movie because it will allow him to make the next movie. So like he's making Coven in order that he might one day make this pie in the sky dream of Northwestern. So even though he's making Coven, he really is making Northwestern, or he's making the thing that will allow him to make it. And then there's like, okay, so Northwestern is just like a symbol of like of art, some artistic itch that he dreams to scratch but will never and can never scratch.
You're right. That's like opening my eyes a little bit why they went with that title. And while he's working, we're getting these like little bits of wisdom from Mark. He turns a phrase, as you said. He has thoughtful things to say, and he kind of talks fast, and it's like, oh, that's gonna stick with me. One of my favorites that he says is, nobody ever paid admission to watch an excuse.
What does that mean to you, Brian?
Like it's not done until it's done. Something I've thought about in different types of classes in school, in life, is that certain fields, you can do things 80% of the way and you'll have a satisfactory product. Other fields, not so. I think about coding, like computer coding, and maybe you can refute this, Dan, but I think of coding as something that you can only really do 100%. It's like it needs to be able to work, and so it needs to have this syntax that all works together. And if you took out any part of it, it wouldn't work. But like if you're writing a book, like you could take out a sentence and nothing is going to grind to a halt.
I think there's nuance to the computer programming analogy. I could talk your ear off about that because that's a much discussed topic among software developers. Basically, what you said was kind of the assumption up until the late 90s. And then there was this sort of revolution among developers called agile development, which is basically to say, how can we make what you just said not be true? How can we make it so that every single little bit that we deliver is the smallest functional bit? You only deliver something, you only make something if that is like an independently deliverable little bit, rather than like, okay, you're 80% of the way there, but you don't have anything to show for it, you know? And so much of the history of software development has been reckoning with that very question, Brian.
That's really interesting. I'm glad that we talked about that.
The terminology that there's a lot of terms that like agile thinking kind of developed its own vocabulary, but the term is you always want to build the minimum viable product that you can then deliver. And then subsequently, each next iteration is the minimum viable product. And that's a phrase that gets in my head a lot, like minimum viable product. Sometimes when you're watching a movie, you're like, this thing is barely the minimum viable product, you know?
Yeah, that's a good studio name. Minimum viable product. Mark mentions that his favorite movies, the most influential movies on him, were Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Those are his examples.
Have we talked, Brian, about why is it that people who really love movies are drawn to horror movies? And this movie, I think, sheds a little bit of light on that, in that, like, people who are totally obsessed with movies have demons, and horror movies are a way to examine and purge demons. That's kind of been part of my reasoning for it, but I don't know. It's like, so I'm in some discords about movie lovers, and it really just seems like the deeper you are into movies, the more you are just like obsessed with the entire history of horror movies, and not just the history of them, but like, give me the weird, obscure, violent, grungy horror movies. And like, that's what you kind of latch onto, the whole chain of obscure franchises. And I don't know. I kind of don't really see myself there, although I have binged some horror series, so maybe I am there now. I don't know. But it just seems there's like an appeal there that draws cinephiles in particular into.
You're onto something. James Rolfe's little company, his website is called Cinemassacre, and it very much grew out of an obsession with horror. And his best history videos are about horror history. Every October for a long time, he would do this series called Monster Madness, where every day in October he'd post like a 5-minute review of some horror movie. And the first season was like the essentials, and it went chronological. It's like, here's the 31 most essential horror movies. And then like most of the years he had some kind of a theme, but it just went like deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole until you're watching really strange things. And it was very educational. And yeah, I think you're right. And maybe it does appeal to the like twisted, isolated individuals, but maybe it's also that it's cheap to make these kind of movies. And, you know, you can get actors at the ground level. And what Mark specifically says about the Romero movies and Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that, like, they're independent. And, you know, it's out in a forest in Pittsburgh or something. And he says, I saw this and it was real. Like, it didn't look like another kind of movie. It just looked like somebody went out there with their camera.
But, like, that doesn't have to be horror. I don't know. It feels like he's drawn to the transgressive elements, even if he doesn't articulate that. Because all of those have an element of, like, something about the human condition or the human body being like ruptured and violated to some extent.
You're right.
Like, how does he like Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Fiction? There's a movie that was made for $1,000, but that's just people talking to each other. I don't know. He doesn't cite that one. So, yeah.
It does show his bookshelf at one point, and like what's on the bookshelf. He's got like a bunch of scripts by various people. He has the script for Do the Right Thing on his shelf. I don't know. It was a quick pan shot, so I couldn't read a lot of the titles. I saw the funky font for Do the Right Thing.
Yeah. I liked this too, and I think if I ever go watch it again, it might be enlightening. It's almost like, I don't know. I think early on, this Chris Smith, is that the name of the director? Maybe he was initially more fascinated in like what this guy was as a filmmaker as opposed to a human being. And like, as the movie went along, he's like, oh, wait, no, this is actually more interesting examining this dude as a human being. Because that does come early in the film, I think.
That's right. It's kind of an establishing shot.
Because the opening bit is like all about actually the preparations for making the movie. And it really kind of focuses in on that at first. And then it kind of like becomes slightly more zoomed out on this guy and his life as time passes. I mean, maybe just because, he wasn't making the movie, so there was nothing else to be talking about.
There's a line that Mark says that later on he made a cameo in Family Guy and said the line again, or they may have just used the audio from the film, I'm not sure, but he says, if you saw something going on in front of you, would you know instinctively to center it in front of you? So he's always drawing from his friends and family to be the crew, like run the equipment, even though they don't necessarily know how to. And so he gives them like a little crash course.
I found this fascinating. Always like teaching him about it. The interesting thing about him, so it's like he's different from Tommy Wiseau, for example, in that like he gets movies. He like knows the language of film. And he kind of seems to understand why they work and how they fit together, like on a mechanical level, but also like almost a storytelling level. He kind of gets it, And Tommy Wiseau, of course, he's just a totally loopy person.
Right. But also Tommy Wiseau has $6 million to throw at a problem.
Right. Yeah.
And this guy does not.
And he also, I was really thinking of Gauntlet, Brian, just the way that like every single time he's shooting something, it's like the same 4 people showing up, including his family. And, Gauntlet, you saw the same crew frequently, and they were mostly your buddies, which is no shade on Gauntlet. That was part of the joy of that experience. I'll remind listeners, Count Gauntlet's Horrors from the Public Domain was Brian's wonderful public access TV show for many years on a state of hiatus of sorts.
That's right.
But yeah, so he's like trying to explain these concepts, like how you frame something. And there was one bit where he's like, I think is it his mom? It's like someone, or maybe it's his girlfriend. His girlfriend looks a lot like his mom. That threw me off a couple times. And he's like trying to explain, oh, it's okay if my whole head isn't in the frame because you can still get, that's not what we're trying to see, the whole head. It's like, it's okay. You just want to see this bit and this bit. So frame it so it's like that.
And she like keeps following him with the camera. Yeah, it's the mom. And then she's like, well, you went out of it. And she has the heaviest. They say she's like from Sweden or something. She's got the most extreme Midwest, don't you know, accent.
Well, it's a bizarre accent because it's that, but it's also like, something Swedish, something like that.
And she's like, you went out of it. He's like, it's okay if I go out of it. And she's like, keeps trying to pan to like follow him.
And there's like so many moments like that where I'm like, okay, this is the concept of the movie in a nutshell. And then we'd see another scene. I'm like, oh, no, wait, no, that scene's the concept of the movie in a nutshell. There's just like so many moments that register as something. he has this all-timer monologue where he's talking about how he got drunk on peppermint schnapps and started calling Morocco. And is that really what you want to be doing with your life, is calling Morocco at 2 a.m. after you've been down in peppermint schnapps? And I was like, write that one down. There's that. That's a good one right there. That's like something, yeah.
That was the moment that James Rolfe said is the best part of the movie.
It's great.
He says, "Who wants to be getting drunk at 2 a.m. and calling Morocco? That's senseless. But that's what happens, man." And yeah, James Rolfe basically described that moment as life-changing.
It's pretty funny. There's a long shadow over everything that happens, which is that Mark is like pretty clearly a alcoholic, like a barely functioning alcoholic. He's always talking about booze, and this is in sharp contrast to his friend. What's the name of that guy? The other one?
He's got a friend named Mike Shank.
Yeah, who is about a year sober during the film, but talks about how he struggled with his own substance abuse issues in extremely evocative ways throughout the film.
Yeah, and that's kind of how they became friends, is that they would drink together.
Mm-hmm. When Mike is talking about how he and Mark met each other, he's like narrating this night of partying. And this Mike character, he's just an all-timer, man. He's up there in terms of like just great supporting characters. Like, you almost, if he was in like a comedy movie, I'd almost be like, that character was acting a little too silly. Like, I didn't believe that was a real person. And yet, like, here in a documentary, it's like the truth really is stranger than fiction, you know? And he's got this, like, I don't know, just to project a little bit, like, he talks about partying really hard, and you get the sense that he might have, like, damaged his brain from all the drugs and booze he'd had in the 20 years preceding the filming of this. And he's got kind of this glassy-eyed look about him, but also this soulfulness to him. Like, you know that he wants to, like, find the light in this world, but in a way that's just, like, kind of dopey and airy and just kind of hanging around. It's like, he's just such a contrast to Mark, because Mark is always clawing and pursuing and dreaming. And Mike is just there. He's just, like, living in the moment, but, like, not consciously living in the moment. That's just, like, his way of being, is just living in the moment, just being kind of dopey about it. And so anyways, like, whenever he starts talking, you know something amazing's about to come out of his mouth. This is being Mike. And he starts talking about how he met Mark, and he gives this, like, the story of, like, partying, and then Mark came along and was the only one who could keep up with him partying. And he says the word vodka, except he pronounces it vodka. We had vodka. Except he doesn't really, like, have as much of an accent, that, like, it's not like a European thing. That's just the way that he says it. And he says the word vodka about 17 times in this one little, like, 60-second monologue that he gives. And it's just a marvelous thing.
And he's, like, very soft-spoken, and he has this kind of woolly hair and a little mustache. He's kind of a short guy. And, it's always funny. I laughed again every time that he would get a little talking head. He had another one that he said where, so he doesn't drink anymore, he doesn't do drugs anymore. He does seem to gamble a lot. He's always doing the scratch-off cards. And he talks to the camera, he says, "Well, when you do drugs and alcohol, you always lose. But when you gamble, sometimes you win." Or I think he said it the other way around.
Yeah.
When you gamble, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But with drugs and alcohol, you always lose.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, quite honestly, like, I've talked a lot about John Green, the podcaster, vlogger, writer. And one thing that he said that stuck with me is pretty much everybody has a vice, you know? Everybody's got a vice. So, like, the question is, what is your vice going to be? And, like, it's perhaps good to choose the least harmful vice that you can, you know? And he was talking about this in the context of Diet Dr. Pepper. He's like, Diet Dr. Pepper is, these days, his vice. It's not a healthy thing, but it's about as non-unhealthy as an unhealthy thing can be, you know? And I was thinking, like, this is major harm reduction. Like, if you go on a quote unquote binge buying scratch offs, maybe you spend like $50 buying lotto tickets. And then you're like, oh boy, well, I spent $50 and one of them I won $20. So I'm down $30 for the day. And now I'm just going to go and do my day, you know? Whereas, like, if you go on a hard binge of drugs or alcohol, not only are you also down the $50, but like you have a hangover, you might die in a car accident, you have brain damage and stuff. So like they're kind of making fun of him at points for like being addicted to scratch offs, but that really seems like scratch offs is about as low stakes a gambling addiction as one could have. I'm not to say it probably is detrimental, and I'm sure people really struggle with that in ways that impact their lives. But again, it really feels like he's made his life better in the 2 years that precede the start of the filming of this.
Right. And so then there's kind of that degree of tension between him and Mark, because Mark is very much still in this rut. But also there's like the weird tension of like Mark is the lead character and Mike is the supporting character, and Mark is the leader and Mike is the follower. And so like I think there could be some resentment from Mark towards Mike if Mike is going to frame himself as like having bettered himself. It's kind of crab mentality. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, why should you be getting ahead? Why should you be changing anything? You're just the sidekick.
Right. Yeah. But I will say, Mike, he never talks down that we see about Mark. He's like, I don't party anymore. Drinking is not good for me. And he doesn't be like, Mark, you really ought to stop drinking. You know, other people say, yeah, he drinks too much. He gets crazy when he drinks. Mike doesn't. Mike is like, I'm just not going to do it. And I got really annoyed at Mark a couple times. He's like, hey, I got some beer here. You want some beer? And like, you don't like flaunt beer in front of the face of an ex-alcoholic trying to make his life better, regardless of how you feel about yourself. And he's like, oh, let's go down to the bar together, man. Hey, we got money. We can do it. It's just easy. You just go down to the bar with that money.
Mike has money. It's like,
well, good point.
You got money. Let's go buy beer. Yeah, Mark is an asshole. Like, we're definitely going to devote some time to how do we feel about Mark in the aftermath of this film. He's not a nice guy. It's kind of like a Goofus and Gallant thing for me watching this. It's like, or what do they say in the knife safety episode of The Simpsons? Don't do what Donnie Don't does. It's like, I gotta not do the things that Mark Borchardt does. It's like a cautionary tale. If this movie has an arc, there's kind of a lot of wheel spinning, and that's kind of the point. But remember, he's working on this short film Coh-ven, and to make the film, he's got to raise some funds. Even just for a short film, got to raise some funds. And so he keeps begging for money from his uncle, who might be his great uncle. I'm not exactly sure of the genealogy, but he's this old man who lives in a trailer. Have you ever seen the show Trailer Park Boys, Dan?
No.
Okay, I just kept thinking of Trailer Park Boys watching this, which is another thing that I've probably watched since the first time I saw this movie. But there, it's like a mockumentary comedy set at a trailer park in Canada, and the central characters are these like 2-bit criminals. Like they're kind of gangsters, except all the crimes are so low stakes and incompetent. It's like penniless Sopranos. But they are always going around this trailer park. And some of the characters had me reminded of this. I saw some connections. So this Uncle Bill, I guess, has got some money. He says he's got like $250,000 saved away or something. I am curious about what his life story is.
Oh yeah. There's like, he's like a mask of like this totally other life. We just get a little glimpse of it. Yeah.
And yeah, so this whole dynamic is complicated because Mark keeps hitting Uncle Bill up for money, and Uncle Bill he has some understandable reluctance. And like he's always cutting Mark down. He's always got some clapback. Something to say, like, you know, Mark will say, "Oh, well, we're just about to start production," and Bill will say, "Oh, that'll be the day."
Right.
And it's always like immediate. And it was kind of funny because he seems kind of senile, but he's always ready to say the financially responsible thing.
There's a lot of complex things going on in this relationship. So one is that he's his Uncle Bill, is that what it is? But he looks like Mark, but 50 years older. And so there's this sense of what I may become, what like one thing, like Mark's kind of looking at his future when he spends time with his Uncle Bill more than his father. His father seems like he doesn't look quite as much like Mark, and their demeanors are a little more different. But in Uncle Bill, you're right, he's got the quick tongue the same way that Mark's got a quick tongue. He's got this appetite for drinking the same way that Mark's got this appetite for drinking. So there's this sense that like he's like a ghost of Mark's future. But also, okay, so Mark is always hanging around Uncle Bill. And it is ostensibly, you're right, it's ostensibly because, well, hold on, Uncle Bill's the guy who's got the bank account. Maybe if I butter him up, he'll write me a little bit of a check. Maybe if I say nice things to him and bring these pictures of these pretty girls I want to cast, he'll give me a check. But like also he's spending a lot of time with him and like connecting with him and like eating Thanksgiving dinner with him. And I don't know, it's like in some ways like he has a more authentic connection with his uncle, he's supposedly trying to like just butter up to get money from, than he does from like other family members in his life. And I don't know, there's like a weird sort of kinship that exists there that is, it's not easy to reduce. I don't think you can say, oh, he's preying upon his uncle. No, it's more complicated than that. This is an interesting, like this to me, again, I keep saying every time I see something, I'm like, that's the heart of this movie. Another one is, okay, this guy's relationship with his uncle is like a deeply lonely person who has clearly had this long life, saved all this money, and now is just kind of sitting around and maybe enjoying his being old, but like he just seems so lonely, and like what was it all for if he's just sitting around this trailer? I don't know. But then here comes Mark, who's got this grand vision on life, except the uncle doesn't quite buy into it. I don't know. That's what this movie is about. There's like item number 2 that that's this movie in a nutshell. Like trying to figure out what each of those characters and their relationship with each other and the way that they're different from each other is like the American dream in a nutshell. That's the second thing where I was like, okay, that's what this movie's about.
Yeah, because at one point Mark is giving Uncle Bill a sponge bath. So like he does do things for Uncle Bill, and yeah, Bill has saved up this money and it's his money to do with as he pleases, but he also seems to not be doing anything with it. So like he just sits there and he doesn't seem to have any aspirations, and like you wonder, you can't take it with you, right? So it makes sense to do something with your money. I think we just saw in the last week or so, Bill Gates announced that he's going to do the Carnegie thing and try to give away all his money before he dies to various philanthropic causes. And like, you don't necessarily have to do that. You could give it to your family or what have you, but probably you got some plan with it and you're not just sitting. And it's like every time he shows up at Uncle Bill's house, it's almost like Hannibal Lecter standing in the middle of his cell. It's like he's just there in the middle of the space, not clearly doing anything.
Right. And the uncle like clearly doesn't, he basically only says negative and skeptical things about Mark and his movie making, but then he's also like always there and like ultimately is a supporter of it. and he appears in it. And part of that is just like Mark kind of foisting his uncle as like, oh, you're the executive producer, we're going to give you a cool cameo. But also it's like, it just seems like kind of they have this sort of relationship where the uncle is constantly skeptical and he's constantly saying negative things, but he's also grateful to be a part of it and like kind of along for the ride to some extent with it, you know?
Right. So the goal Mark sets for himself early on is he says he does get Uncle Bill to like create him an LLC or something, create some business fund that's associated with the enterprise. And Mark says, oh, this is great. I'll pay you back as soon as I sell 3,000 VHS copies at $15 each in 1999. So at this point, he has sold that many VHS copies because it became like a novelty thing. It makes me wish I had one of these VHS copies, which I don't. But like it still seems like a pretty ambitious goal.
Definitely. It's like he has this little monologue early on that he has like a chart of like how much money he would make if he sold this many versus this many versus this many. And I think he's trying to do like the entrepreneur thing, like the startup thing of like, we're going to grow, we're going to hit our big goal. And it's like, again, he's trying to like will it to be so. But he kind of fumbles through it. He like wipes, he's like, oh wait, I imagine the 3,000 one is still there. Because that's the number that he decides he's going to sell is 3,000. Which is like just the perfect number in that like it almost sounds realistic until you actually like imagine what would have to happen for 3,000 people to want to buy it. Like that's so far beyond just like calling up your friends and saying, hey, I'm selling this. Like, do you and your friends want to buy any? You know, like you actually have to have real marketing, real audience to sell 3,000 male VHSs. I was actually thinking of that Feeders, Brian. Is that what it was called?
Right, the Polonia brothers. I was thinking about that too, is did he get like some kind of distribution in the video stores?
Yeah.
Which is what they did with Feeders. They like signed a deal with Blockbuster in the wake of Independence Day, which is kind of crazy. But, you know, video stores needed titles on their shelves, affordable titles that they could just kind of buy in bulk and always have, so that there was something for people to rent. And we do kind of see different characters' perspectives on Mark's filmmaking. Like the mom, who, you know, he lives with the mom, and she does at one point say, I don't know if this is ever going to go anywhere. I don't know if he's ever going to actually make anything. He also has that other friend who, I think his name is Kenny.
Yes.
And they say Kenny is the bad influence. The mom says Kenny is a bad influence on him, and he's a bad influence on Kenny. And then it cuts to Kenny. He's like, so I met Mark when I just gotten out of jail.
And then we see him getting bailed out also, like a little bit later. And
very much a character that had me thinking of Trailer Park Boys.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also funny because this guy, he looks the most normal and like well-adjusted on the outside. He just kind of looks like a normal guy more so than either Mark or Mike does. But then, yeah, he's getting into trouble as well.
I also liked these actors that he works with who are like always showing up for his projects. And recently I got a recommended reel on Instagram or Facebook or something, which was talking about independent actors, like actors just starting out, living somewhere that's not a major production hub. They really are so hungry. Like, I love actors, need actors, but many of them will take what they can get and will like travel to get it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's when I did that interview of the guy who starred in After Last Season. That was the gist of it. It was like, they knew the movie was bad and that the guy making it was weird, but like it was an acting job, you know, for a feature-length film with a guy who had money. So yeah, you take that's your job. You take the opportunities you can get, which I sympathize with, you know?
Yeah. And so there's this one actor whose name is Tom Schimmel, And I guess he was like cast in the lead of Northwestern. And so the whole movie he's kind of griping. It's like, well, we're doing this now, I guess.
Right.
Hope we get back on track with Northwestern.
I really like the scene where they filmed him getting his head going through the door. And it's like simultaneously, like, you're getting the sense that, okay, he has some vision of how to make it look real. And then also it's just like very pathetic and humorous to watch him like get his head smashed through this cabinet door. And just very degrading almost, you know?
Yeah, because they, before it starts, they describe how they're going to score the cabinet to make it break away when the actor hits it. And then they do the take, and they slam him into the cabinet, and it damages the man much more than the cabinet.
Right. And then they're like, that's not quite right. We got to do it again. And everybody's just like groaning.
And then there's another actor who's got like a little beard, and I think he might have like a little hat and a cape at one point. He's the flamboyant guy. He's kind of the dandy. And you could tell that they got him off like a community theater stage.
You're right, yeah.
Like a dinner theater or something. And I think he's the one who finally calls out Mark on, it's Coh-ven.
Yeah.
It's not Coh-ven.
It was so good.
One thing that somebody says, I don't remember what character. Oh, Mark's got two brothers that they talk to a couple times, and they kind of have their lives more on track. And I think it's one of them who lays it out and says, what is this for? Why is Mark doing this? What is the drive? What is the end goal of it? Why is this his reason to be? And he's like, is it entertaining? Do people want to see this? And it had me right back in our discussion of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the adaptation, where we're like, why are they spending their lives doing this?
So what did you think of this, Brian? As someone who is about to start making his own short film, why are you doing that?
So, I think there's a couple pieces to it. This one is something that I think about. There is a Twilight Zone episode where Bill Mumy, a child actor, plays the evil tyrannical child with mind control. They did a parody of it on The Simpsons where Bart had the mind control powers. The episode is called It's a Good Life. Have you ever seen that? Or are you familiar with it?
I don't think so.
Okay, so the concept is this child has, like, God powers, universe-controlling powers, and so the people in the town have to appease him. And, like, all the grown-ups have to kind of live in fear of this kid's whims because he can do anything. And so they're always like, wow, good job, Billy! You did it great. Whatever he does, even if it's like a scary, terrible thing. But one of the things that the kid will do is he holds movie nights, and he makes, like, everybody get together in the living room of his house, and he'll generate a TV show that he makes them watch. And it's like, the episode that we see is just like dinosaurs fighting. Like, that's what a child wants to see on TV, is like little model dinosaurs wrestling. And just all the adults are sitting there very tense and uncomfortable and scared. But that's the mode that they're always in, because they're always afraid they're going to make this misstep. But then the TV show comes to an end, and the kid stands up and starts clapping, and he says, "That's all the television there is." And I feel like there is a sadistic part of me that, like, that would be the dream. It's just like, that's what you got. Gonna watch this. Of course, that's not really how the world is. But there's like a spark of godhood in making a thing that then can be broadcast. It's like you've created your own little world, that any time in the future you can peer back into, and it's a little testament to what you've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel kind of the same way. So, I mean, I spend many, many hours of my life editing the podcast that you're listening to and writing movie reviews. And in particular, like right now, I am on a 27-day streak of publishing a movie review every day. And I will say, after I watched this movie, I was like, I'm just going to stop my streak. I don't care. What does it matter? What's the point? Why? I mean, it's not the same as making a movie, but some of the same impulses there, like where, okay, once you've made it, once you've written the thing, whether it's a story or review, it's done. And you can point at it and say, I made this. This is a thing that came from my mind and my soul and my perception of the world. And it's now out there. It exists. It can be read. It is a refraction of my brain and my soul into something. And maybe it's a little different if it's like writing about a movie that somebody else made as opposed to actually making a story yourself. But I think it's similar impulses, you know? I still feel kind of the same way. Like I've made something, even if it's just a movie review. But watching this, like I said, I was like depressed. I was like, I feel like I'm wasting my life. Like I spend so much hours and willpower thinking about like, I really want to write that review, or I really want to edit that podcast, or I really want to like do the next thing in my like ambition to comment upon movies in this world. And then like, I don't know. I felt depressed after watching this movie. Like I didn't want to do it anymore because like it just feels so small. Like even, okay, let's say he makes his movie and he does. I mean, he does by the end of it. And we can talk about how we felt about where this all leads to. But like, okay, so it's just such a small, like, yes, you made something. Yes, it exists. But like, is anyone any different for that thing having been made? Is this world any different? Yes, I can go and look at it and point at it and say, I made that thing. Or as you said, I made this world, this window into this world as like a sort of God myself, you know? But like, so what? How does that change your life? How does that change this world? The fact that you have done that thing. And it just feels so small. And like, I was feeling that crushing me after I watched American Movie, Brian. And I will say I bounced back enough to keep the streak alive. The streak, as of the recording, still exists. I talked myself into it. I was like, well, I can't undo having written it, having made this thing, you know, like, but if I, it's like, it's almost like it's riskier to do nothing than it is to do something. Like that's, I guess like Mark Borchardt or whatever his name is, he's ultimately kind of a pathetic figure in some ways. And like his success and dreams feel so small and pointless, but like, it's more than like, I don't know, Uncle Bill just sitting in a trailer, right? Maybe. I don't know, Brian. Tell me, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Why do we do the things that we do, Brian?
I can't answer that other than to say that I'm feeling the same things. I came out of this watch this week feeling really down. Like I was not feeling good. But as we're talking about it, like this is a really evocative film in a lot of good ways. And like, think about if these two people, Smith and Borchardt, hadn't walked into the same editing bay or whatever, and this story was never told. And that's what I was really thinking about watching it, is like, think about how many people are out there doing this or less than this and just are never noticed at all. Like people could be pursuing projects, or maybe they're just sitting in trailers. Like millions of people, a whole continent-sized country of people who just are living lives unsung.
So you think there's value in the singing, in the act of creation? You think it's more noble to do that?
I think so. Maybe that's just covering my own ass, but I think so.
I guess the weird counterpoint, the weird, like, the thing that really, like, threw me for a loop is something we haven't said about Mark. Something that to me is very defining about him, and yet it's almost treated as a throwaway. And that is that he's a father of 3 children. And he has a weird relationship with the mom. We get fringes of it. It seems like they're not together, but like, and Mark sort of has this other girlfriend who appears a lot. Even by the end, I'm not sure if we're seeing her anymore. I can't remember. But also, like, there seems to be this sort of air of, like, maybe Mark and the mom still have a thing. And they're kind of arguing about whether or not they actually do, or whether they're going to have a life together. That we get, like, we actually get one glimpse of them arguing, like, from afar. And yeah, he's got these 3 kids, and they're not super young. They're like, I don't know, like 8 and 5 and 2 or something like that, you know?
Yeah, it's complicated because we never get it from the mom's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't totally know what's going on there, because obviously they're separated, but he does see the kids, and she lives in the area, and there's like discussion of almost like she's waiting for him.
Right.
Waiting for him to see the light and they'll get back together. But then Mark says, at least he thinks, that she's living with a guy. That's not confirmed. We don't see that. So it's complicated, because then kind of the big blow up is she says she's going to move away. And like, if she didn't think they were going to get back together, why would that be such a cudgel to hit him with? So yeah, unanswered questions in that plot line for me, but he's got the kids.
And he does spend time with his kids. He's not like a total deadbeat, you know? And he seems to want what's best for them. And like to teach them and to like show them that you can make something. And that in some ways made this all the sadder for me, because first of all, he's not really doing it, you know? Like he sort of is. He's doing it more than other people, but also he's like investing so much life force into making this thing. And like, he's not Steven Spielberg. He's not going to Hollywood making $1 billion, you know? And imagine if this life force was instead devoted towards being a dad, building a treehouse in the backyard, teaching his kid about dinosaurs, heck, teaching his kid about movies. Like, oh, here's, you know what's really cool about German Expressionism is this and that. And like, I don't know. And to me, that's why this felt almost like it came, as the movie went along, his obsession with making movies stopped being inspirational and started feeling like a pathology, like a thing he had to do compulsively, like a disease on his skin that like, instead of putting lotion on it, he has to go and like make a weirdo movie with his buddies. And that's the only way that he can heal that disease on him. So in some ways that was like sad for me too. I don't know.
Oh, this whole thing is sad. But the final like third of the movie, they've filmed Coh-ven, and now he's editing Coh-ven, and he's camped out at the editing suites at University Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Milwaukee. University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee is the name of the school that this was filmed at. And so he's in this edit bay, which is so old school. Like, it's a reel-to-reel film editing deck. And he's got to go in the room to use it. And he's literally sleeping in the edit room. And, like, Mike comes and has a sleepover with him in the edit room. And several nights the kids are sleeping there in the edit room. So it really is, it's like 24/7, it seems.
I was kind of blown away how Mike just keeps showing up. It's like, I wouldn't think he had it in him to actually edit film strip, but there he is doing it, and he's like getting it and like talking about frame numbers and stuff. And I don't know, he just grows more endearing as the movie goes along, and impressive in some ways.
And I liked that it cuts to an interview with the children, And the director asks, so do you want to make films? And the kids say, no.
It's too hard.
Too expensive, takes too long.
Yeah, one of them's like, yeah. And then they're like, well, I guess now that I think about it, no. There doesn't seem to be any point, and it's expensive, and it takes all your time. Okay,
and
there you go.
That's like the capper of the movie.
Yeah.
So I was not really feeling the inspiration that James Rolfe described. But, I mean, we've got a lot of conversational and, like, metaphysical, philosophical meat out of this. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that it was made. We'll see whether it's good or not at the end. There's one exchange where Mark has his actors smashing windows in a car in a junkyard for like the big climax of Coh-ven. And so Mike is standing up on the roof wailing on the windshield of a car with a baseball bat. And he finally climbs down and Mark says, wasn't that cathartic?
Oh, this is so good, yeah.
This discussion, because it seems that Mark is the only one in town even who would use a word like cathartic.
Right. He's a guy who would read the word cathartic in a book. Because he didn't even graduate high school, by the way. He's not an academic. They talk about how he dropped out of high school. That
is interesting.
So, like, yeah, but yet he does know what the word cathartic means. That's why he's a complicated figure. Because he does have some... He's not a doofus, you know? He's got a natural wit and curiosity and intellectual vigor for the world, but, like, it's, like, compromised by these other demons that he has and these compulsions that he has.
Right. He's like unmoored. He's always drinking, and he's got the fire in him, but it's not like driving him any direction that's constructive. So he finally finishes cutting the movie, and he has this premiere. And actually, it does seem like a lot of people come out for the premiere. I mean, it's a little theater, but it's like full.
I wondered how he got so many people to show up. Because it genuinely looks like hundreds of people lined up for this.
Yeah, it reminded me of the ending of Ed Wood.
Yeah.
That has the screening of Plan 9.
But, like, that one has the unspoken joke that everybody's about to, like, watch the worst movie ever made. This one leaves you wondering, what do people think of it, you know? I don't know.
That's right. There's not, like, a lot of aftermath dissection with the audience.
And probably they're just like, okay, I watched the thing. It was okay. Like, my wife has shared with me a meme that is like, whenever I watch a movie, my main reaction is, that was a movie, or something like that. Like, I don't have a deep reaction to the thing. And I think that's probably what most of the people there thought. Is now where we can say that you can actually watch Coh-ven on YouTube elsewhere.
That's right. It's about 40 minutes long. And so did you watch Coh-ven, Dan?
Yes. Not for me, but it's interesting because there's something that this movie does, or that this documentary does, where when he's talking about his favorite movies, he's talking about Night of the Living Dead, and he's talking about Chainsaw Massacre, and he's describing with some precision about, like, what those movies feel like to him and the things that he takes away from them. And then as we hear him doing this, Chris Smith has edited in stuff from movies that Mark has made against... I don't know if we actually see the other movies, but, like...
I think there's some of Night of the Living Dead, because it's in public domain.
Gotcha, yeah. But, like, genuinely, he does seem to kind of get movies and have, like, some artistic ability. Like, he can take these ideas and turn it into an actual visual thing. But it's also not great cinema. It's kind of clunky pacing and, like, over scripted. Some of the images are kind of powerful. Like, there's when you see all the hooded people appear that in the woods, that was kind of creepy. And then you, like, zoom in on their face, and when you expect to be able to see their face, it's just gaping darkness. And it's in this stark black and white cinematography, which he references a few times in the film, but I found pretty interesting.
Yeah, I thought what was best was the opening, where it's these shots. I think one of the Halloweens, maybe Halloween 4, starts out similar to this, where it's just scenes of like autumn in the desolate, like empty cornfields. It's like so Coh-ven has a shot of these scarecrows like leaning in the wind and like telephone poles, and it's just like emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, humans are around, but maybe not for a few miles. And there was something like genuinely creepy about that, and like well composed, and it's got the black and white cinematography. I really liked, like, when this movie starts, American movie, the documentary, there's people setting up these scarecrows for this shot. And then Mark, like the voiceover from Mark, he says, "There's people setting up scarecrows in the yard. God knows why. They serve no pragmatic purpose. But I got people walking around, and I wish I could give them a destiny."
I knew when I saw that, I was like, okay, this movie it's got something. It's got something to say, even if it doesn't know it has something to say. It's like, I remember when way back we watched the Rock of Fire Explosion, and it starts with this monologue by, what's that guy's name again?
Is it the inventor?
Yeah.
Oh, Aaron Fechter.
Yeah, Aaron Fechter, like, I don't even remember what he's talking about, but like sometimes when you watch a weird documentary, you get 60 seconds in and you're just in loopy land where you're going to see like the nature of human existence laid out in front of you. And that is precisely what happened.
I believe the first thing he's talking about is his plan to revolutionize the energy sector. He's like, I'm going to create the next solar panel or something.
Yeah. But he just phrases it in such a strange way. So it's interesting. The movie pretty much ends with the film screening, and then we have like another like 2 minutes of movie left, and it's just Mark hanging out with his Uncle Bill. Around that time, he narrates the story of another one. It feels like an all-timer monologue. He talks about how I was working at the cemetery and I went into the bathroom, and man, this guy, he shit everywhere. It didn't go in the toilet. It was on the walls and on the floor. And I just stood there for a solid 30 seconds looking at some guy's shit and thinking about the fact that I was looking at his shit or something like that. And that comes near the end of the movie. And that one kind of blew my mind, because that's another one where like, okay, that's what this movie is about right there. Looking at someone else's shit. But the way it actually ends is he's just hanging out in the trailer with Uncle Bill, and then cut to a title card. Uncle Bill died and left a lot of money to him.
Right. He left $50,000. He died a month after the end of the documentary, and left Mark $50,000 in his will, ostensibly for production of Northwestern.
Right.
So that's like a really potent end card, because obviously he did leave some kind of mark on Uncle Bill.
Yeah, definitely.
To this day, Northwestern is unmade.
It's like the white whale. I don't think it needs to be made. I think the idea of it is more powerful than it ever actually existing, It's like, I thought of, the Beach Boys, the band The Beach Boys in the 60s, they were like working on this album called Smile. And it was like the epitome. It was like the album, the great lost American album, And for just decades afterwards, people talked about what Smile could have been. Dreaming about, we lost this masterpiece we didn't get. And then in like 2012 or something, one of the Beach Boys in his 70s, Brian Wilson, the guy who was kind of the architect of the original Smile that fell apart, made it. And it got good reviews, but also it was like, I don't know, it was more interesting when it was the album that didn't exist, And that's kind of how I feel about Northwestern. It's more interesting as the movie that didn't get made than it is a movie that I would ever actually want to watch. Although, interestingly, it sounds like it was a drama, not a horror film. Which actually Coh-ven kind of had... I didn't entirely follow it, to be honest. There was like... he was in this group and they were like talking about their struggles. I think it was like an Alcoholics Anonymous group or something like some substance abuse support group. And it also felt like Mark was kind of working through his own stuff as he made this script.
Right. So I think the premise of both films, Coh-ven and Northwestern, is they say I gotta go to rehab and I'm like, no. Because, yeah, it's his friends are trying to get him to go to this 12-step program, but actually it's an insidious cult. And, like, they're all against him, and he's the one who's right. And from what little we hear about Northwestern, it sounds like it's more a straight drama version of the same thing. It's like that he would have to go to Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
And so here is quickly my hot take on film school productions is that 95% of them are the storyline of I'm in college and I'm depressed and I take antidepressants and can I afford my apartment? And it's like, dog, just write a journal. It's like people ostensibly are gonna need to want to watch this.
Well, I mean, is that why they're making the movie? I mean, that gets back to the same questions. Like, if the goal is like, I need to make something to process what's going on with me, then maybe that's what it is that those people need to make.
I guess that's so, because on the one hand, like, if it's a real emotion that's being dealt with, like, I guess that's what people want from film, right? They want something relatable. They want something that comments on the human experience in a like understandable, recognizable way. And the other hand is that's cheap. That's like, those are the things that you have on hand to work with. So that's what you make. And what do people say? They say, write what you know, but they also say, don't navel gaze.
Yeah, it's a contradiction.
So it's like any saying, any proverb that you could point to, you can almost always point to an opposite proverb.
Right, like do something fresh, but do what you know. But like you're living an experience that, as you said, millions of people are living. So like, how can you do both of those things? I don't know.
Yeah, I want to see the dinosaurs wrestling.
That's Brian's view on life. That's truly something distinct about you, Brian. Is you won't make I'm in college and I'm depressed. You will make, hey, they're surfing lobsters and they fall in love with human women. Isn't that cool? And they're singing too. Yeah, that is cool. That's not your lived life, but that's the story that you want to tell, you know?
That's right. And the lobster is the woman.
Oh, excuse me.
So I thought that was a little progressive.
There you go. I read this book. Whenever I do something that I'm like, feels pointless, I guess, but is like in pursuit of a dream or an ambition, I think of this. And that is, it's this book called Atomic Habits. It's a pretty interesting book. I found I thought it did a pretty good job of like articulating how you do things in a day-to-day fashion that like ultimately leads you to achieving goals. I know that's like ostensibly like the whole self-improvement industry is about that, but this one does a pretty good and concrete job of it. But like one thing that he talked about is he's a metaphor that he sets up that he likes. And he says, if you have an ice cube, all right, and let's say the ice cube, it's 20 degrees, okay? And you go from 20 to 21 degrees. Nothing's different. You go from 21 to 22 degrees. Nothing's different. It's still, the ice cube looks exactly the same. You keep doing that. When you go from 32 to 33 degrees, all of a sudden the ice is starting to melt. And then when you go from 33 to 34 degrees, the ice is melting faster. So ostensibly, if the thing started at 20 degrees, you can't go straight into melting the thing. You have to do the first 12 degrees, the first 12 leaps before the leap that actually makes a measurable difference occurs. And it's not, in fact, that last leap that made the difference. It's all 12 leaps that led you there that made the difference. And you can't do it until you get there. And so, I don't know. Sometimes I think about that too. It's like, well, is what I'm doing just spinning wheels, or am I going from 20 to 21 degrees right now? or maybe 25 to 26 degrees, you know?
Have you ever read Don Quixote?
No.
So I feel like Don Quixote, in the wider imagining of pop culture, is celebrated to an extent. Like, you kind of see the romance of his delusion. Like, you see what he sees in these tales of courtly romance and deeds of chivalry. But if you read the book, it's like very cynical about Don Quixote. Like, look at this loser who's crazy and hurting himself and other people because he got on a knight literature kick. And it's kind of like looking down on people of its own day in like 1600 who are into this knight bullshit. Like the people who dig on Marvel movies.
Interesting.
And so I think that it is a great book. I mean, not an innovative hot take to say that Don Quixote is a great work of literature, but it really makes you think. And I was thinking about some of those things here. It's like, why is he doing what he's doing? He's clearly deluded, but is there a romance to it?
I think there is. I think that's part of the appeal. I think it's kind of what you were talking about. Like, there is some romance and glory in having made something, particularly because the best and the greatest of makers and things made, I'm talking movies, I'm talking books, I'm talking music, are not just seen and consumed by lots of people, but like glorified. They are divine. They're treated almost religiously. They persist through time. The people who made them get wealthy and they become powerful. And so it's like, on the one hand, it's just the artistic compulsion to make something and express it and build something and cool, look what I did. But also, like, that is connected to this vision of like, I am also, like you said, making myself up to be this god, this glorious person, this person getting rich and famous and powerful. And they even talk a little bit about that. It's like, well, why do you want to be a movie producer, Mike? He's like, I don't know. I guess to get the women and the money and the power. And it's very funny coming out because he's got, again, this sort of glassy-eyed, low-key way of saying it. But I do think that's, okay, we just found the next thing. That's what this movie is all about right there. That's the next one. When he's talking about why he wants to make movies. And he's not even the main subject of the film, but like, why is he thinking about it? What does he want to get out of it, you know?
And that's American Movie from 1999. It really is a window in time. I was struck how tedious some of the old school technology must have been. Like, I can't even imagine cutting the film, as we talked about, but it's just been such a sea change so fast in terms of how it's done. I mean, like, not like even to the extent of nobody uses the internet really in this movie. They're stapling things to telephone poles.
Yeah, that's also an interesting thing about it is, like, as time passes, I feel like I've read like a lot of philosophizing on this matter, but as time passes, it always gets easier to make stuff. It becomes, the tools become more broadly accessible and broadly usable. And that's certainly true in filmmaking. I mean, now Steven Soderbergh has shot some of his movies on his iPhone and released them like medium-sized releases. Like, that's literally, I'm standing right here. There's an iPhone in my pocket. I'm holding my iPhone. I just pulled it out of my pocket. This is all that I need to make a feature film right here. I don't need to do what he's doing with like these big heavy cameras and all the actual film you need to buy and like editing, like taping it together, what's the word? Splicing it together. Now you just do it on your phone. I'm not joking, Brian. This morning I was sitting with my 5-year-old and she had my wife's phone and she's made her own 2-minute stop motion movie about these toys going to I don't even know what it is. Going to the pool and then going to the hospital. I didn't understand the story. Point is, my 5-year-old made it herself. Like, you can hit play and watch this 2-minute film that she made. But like for any time in the past, you would have had to have like cameras and film and editing and a way to screen it and all that stuff. And like, I don't know. It really is kind of crazy how much more accessible all this became.
That's awesome. Yeah, so my film, in some ways, intentionally vintage, paying homage to older styles of movies. And one of the professors at the school works at Color Lab, which is a facility for making film prints. And I guess it's like the only big one on the East Coast. You know, there's several out in Los Angeles still, but it's like the only big one on the East Coast. And so he was telling me, oh, well, you know, you could shoot on video, but then press it to film, and then it would have the film look. And so I was thinking about that, like weighing the budget options of that. And I told my cinematographer, who's like actually a guy who works in the industry, like producing commercials and stuff and various things. He says, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. He says, just totally convoluted and pointless and expensive. And he used the word academic very derogatorily. It's like, that's the most academic thing I've ever heard. Because his thought was you can simulate basically anything about the film grain in post-production, at least, you know, so people get the joke without me having to spend extra money. And I thought that was a pretty sound argument, but he was very vehement.
I should get you in touch with this guy that I follow online. He's a cinematographer turned podcaster named Devin Scott. And one of his hills is that the cult of physical film is really dumb because like anything you want to achieve with it, basically what your friend said, like if you want to achieve it, a certain look, you can absolutely do it with computers. Putting it on film does not actually enhance that at all, you know? And the movie, The Holdovers, which came out about 2 years ago. Have you seen that one, Brian?
Haven't seen that one yet. Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, that's one that is like a textbook example of how you can make something look like it was made on film when in fact it's 100% digital. It's like one of the best ever examples of it. Like they got it down to even simulating some of the ways like the focus, the depth of field is a little bit different on film than it is on digital. Simulating that, they got it pretty much right too, apparently. So it still can be some work, but like, yeah, you can, if you want to make it look like it's on film, it's something you can do. And not just in like the corny old 2005 Windows Movie Maker sepia tone filter. Like you can actually have very subtle film grain and film style stuff added in there.
That's really cool. Shout out to a new TV show that's on the air these days called The Studio. I think it's on Apple Plus, but it's from Seth Rogen, who apparently only 42 years old. That blew my mind. I thought he had to have been older than that.
Huh. Yeah. Isn't Jonah Hill about the same age?
I guess they must be. I mean, because they did Superbad, and that was kind of like Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, like, based it on themselves, right? And then the characters in the movie are Seth and Evan.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they wanted to cast, or Seth Rogen wanted to play the character named Seth, because the two main characters are Seth and Evan. Evan is the Michael Cera character, and Seth ended up being played by Jonah Hill. Seth Rogen wanted to play that character, but they're like, you'd look too old. And Jonah Hill's like, I'll play him then. And they're like, dude, you're like my age. And then they got him like dressed up in teen clothes. And they're like, all right, you actually almost look like a teenager.
That's funny. But yeah, I mean, he is such a huge producer now, doing Invincible, you know, doing all his voice roles and things, producing the new Ninja Turtles or whatever. The Studio it's kind of like when Tina Fey made 30 Rock, where it's like a very thinly veiled, fictionalized version of just them living their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Making some high level motion pictures or television. And so it's funny. Every episode is about some quirk of modern movie making, but it's also like really expertly made, and there's a lot of long takes and like showing off with what they can do with the cameras, and I've been vibing with it.
Nice. Yeah, I should check it out at some point.
But Dan, we've been talking for a while now, and I think it's time to say, is American movie good?
So I'll talk us in. Is it good is our signature section where we each give the movie a rating on our 8-point goodness scale, ranging from very not good, which is a 1 out of 8, to our masterpiece rating, toward a good, which is an 8 out of 8. Brian, this has a lot in common with many of my favorite documentaries. I would still say my favorite documentary ever made is Gates of Heaven, which is about a pet cemetery. I'll pick it at some point for the pod. It kind of like this movie, it like touches on a lot of aspects of the human condition. That one is a lot. It has some of like the how do I make my life and what is the purpose of being a productive adult that some of this has. But that one also has the element of like reckoning with the spiritual because it's about a cemetery. And I don't know, I just like documentaries that, first of all, don't have a narrator and kind of let the subjects speak for themselves. I tend to prefer that. Not to say always, but I tend to. And this does a great job of not making it be Chris Smith thinking about Mark Borchardt, but here's Mark Borchardt. Of course, every movie, even documentaries, are curated and edited in a way where the filmmaker's voice is there, you know? And I think it's very interesting to wonder, what was Chris Smith thinking? Did he see kinship in this fellow filmmaker? Was he being derogatory? Certainly, it's a blend of the two. I think it's impossible to watch this and not like see Mark as a little bit pathetic, but also like be a filmmaker and kind of understand what he's going through. Be a creator of any sort and understand what he's going through. So I don't know. I think this probably is a masterpiece of a movie, but it really made me feel depressed. Like it made me feel sad. And like, why do I do the things that I personally do? And have I been also wasting my life caring about the things that I care about so that I cannot give it a toward a good masterpiece rating, even though I feel like it probably deserves it? I'm going to give it an exceptionally good for now. And then maybe someday I will give it the masterpiece rating it probably deserves.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was feeling kind of down on it before we sat down today, but our conversation has elevated it. It's opened my eyes a little bit. Certainly, it's very memorable, but it captures a lot. As you said, you can point to 10 scenes and say this is what the movie is about, and every time you're right, because it's about all those things. It's about, like, the collapse of the Rust Belt. It's about the tarnishing of the American dream. It's losing its luster, but also like the foolishness of being an artist, like the inherent lack of a clear goal or payoff, and why would someone sink their life into that? And how we view that as a culture in a complex fashion, because it's I think stories like this resonate with me. I've talked before about like Chris McCandless, the guy who wandered off into the woods because he wanted to leave society behind, and then like immediately starved to death. And there's the camp that says, oh, he's an inspiration because he's going off the grid and he's living life on his own terms. And then the other side are the people who say, well, no, he's not alive because he was incompetent and a loser and he died. And he was stupid to even think that things would or could go another way. And both of those threads are baked into that film. I think this is a film that is in that same bubble. Like, you got this complicated protagonist and different ways that you could look at him, and you walk away conflicted. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 8, a very good, because all of those things are here in this movie, and it's not feel good. And it's not, to me, inspirational, but I can see why it would captivate other indie filmmakers.
Right. It's like a self-deprecating portrait in some ways. I think everything you said is, I pretty much agree with on this. I mean, it's called American Movie, like you said. I mean, it captures so much about America, but also just a very idiosyncratic portrait of a specific person. You know, it's both. I think sometimes I feel like the best way to get a lens of a broader thing, you have to zoom in on something. And I feel like that this documentary achieves that.
You got to instinctively know to center it in front of you.
There you go. Boom. Mic drop. That's what this movie's about, Brian.
Well, join us again, listeners. Hope you've seen something worthwhile in our endeavor. And tune in once more.